Here we go. We're talking to a presence that comes from Scotland, and I call him Zach.
Hello, Richard. How are you? I like that bit about the presence. I was actually quite joking, but there you go. How you been? It's been a while.
Well, life is always new for me. In my same cocoon, I suppose. I don't want to exaggerate too much, but I do get into different situations, different surroundings.
It'd be nice if we could have a world without borders.
Yeah.
We could just kind of travel as we please.
Okay, it would be nice to have a world without borders. Now, one time you told me you speak with a lot of different people with different backgrounds, let's say.
Yeah, of course.
And so then the borders are already in the people, right? Would you care to...
Yeah, and then what you've got to do is you've got to, in a sense, kind of find the middle way. I mean, I think because of my background, I come from a Muslim background, but predominantly the number of people I speak to are kind of white middle class people. Recently, there's a bit of an interesting phenomenon now where I'm kind of speaking to younger Muslims who are, in a sense, disillusioned by what they're learning in their local mosques. What they're finding is there's obviously a lot of ulama who are called priests basically in the Western tradition, and they go through certain schools and they learn and they get a brand new shiny certificate. However, the actual experience is missing.
Okay, let's just call it internalizing. So then you can say you can say that these foundations are all useful, but then it comes to the challenge of internalizing all that, and then with or without the foundation, that becomes a part of you. And then try to say, well, where is it that we're going? That we want to have this. What are we trying to internalize? Let's talk about that for a while, because the foundations are all various and different, right?
What I'm finding in my experience talking to people is that a lot of people are allowing their basics to, in a sense, choke them. It becomes a kind of be-all and end-all. And they're very quick to, in a sense, kind of really defend their position because of the fact that you're trying to pull them out of a certain position to kind of go to that point where there is really no position, and yet there's an appreciation of all these different kind of positions. The internalizing isn't really happening because of the reality is that a lot of the people that they're talking to aren't able to help them integrate that, that internal.
Well, let's hold on a sec. Let me ask you another question then.
Okay.
Okay. So then, what's the problem that you identified was that they tend to want to defend their foundation because they feel you're pulling them out of it. So then you can say, okay, it's really important for me not to be taken as pulling them out of anything.
I mean, then we're kind of getting into a general field of kind of semantics here. It's important not to see that you're kind of pulling them out.
The best method, of course, is to look in present time, right? To look at something again.
Yeah.
And so that's not really a method that is contained in any foundation material.
It is there as well.
It's there as well. All right. So then that's even easier. So then you could say, well, this is not really a method, but it's just saying that, let's look. And the best way to look is without knowing. Because if you already know, you're not really looking, are you? And so then somehow the foundation has to be set aside or set down while you look.
I'm glad you just said it. So you said set down, as in set aside. And that seems to be the problem, because what's happened is the kind of level of conditioning and the level of learning that you're seeing with a lot of people, they're not willing to, in a sense, let go. Our whole thing comes down to, in a sense, letting go. And, letting go or setting aside or even casting aside, whatever the situation demands. And what you find is a lot of people are willing to, in a sense, do that. So what happens is, like I say to people, when you come to me, you only actually really ask me one question. However, what you'll do is you'll dress it up in so many different ways, but really invariably there's only one question, and that's how do I end this? How do I end seeking? How do I go home, or whatever? It's all kind of just one question that's being asked in so many different ways.
So then, really, we talked about a method or certain techniques, and then we said, okay, well, you can call it a method or not call it a method. And then we said that the best technique is looking, right? And then this is just something you could come up with, right? And coach these people and say, well, really what we're trying to do is to take written truths and internalize them so that they don't even have to be written anymore, because we know for sure. We've internalized them, and we know. How do we know? We know by looking. And so if we know by looking, we have to kind of set down the written part to make sure that we're just knowing what we're looking at instead of knowing what we read before.
The reality is that it was never meant to be kind of put down. It was meant to be something that was kind of like moved on and passed on. But like in a sense, it was like an internal process. There wasn't even really a need for these basics. You would have automatically fell into this if you were to journey inwards to outwards. Now, what I mean by that is if the experience was made king, as opposed to there are certain ways I've got to be and act. Like, for example, if you look at the non-Jew tradition, you have a lot of people who won't refer to themselves in the I sense. If you look at the Islamic tradition, you get a lot of people who turn around and say, brother, you have to pray 5 times a day, or brother, you have to have a beard, or sister, you have to cover up. Then if you look at the Christian tradition, again, it's like you've got to go to church on Sundays and all this stuff. Now, when you're in that, all of this would happen naturally if this journey, or this method, this technique, or whatever you want to call it, was undertaken in the right way, which is from the internal, from the inside, to the outside.
Really, the key of any kind of learning is taking what's being passed on, which is usually in the written form, also the oral form, and then somehow, I'll just say the same word I said before, internalizing it and knowing it yourself. And you can know the written, you can memorize everything, it's not the same. And
yes, exactly.
And that's just what you've got to say, you know. You can say it's true, and our truth is more true than your truth, and all that stuff. But that really avoids the looking and any kind of defense or comparison, even of one written tradition to another written tradition, is kind of missing the boat.
There hasn't been that internal shift. It all emanates from the internal shift. Yeah, if you look at most of these pointers, traditions, paths, whatever, they all started from someone having an internal shift. And then what emanated from that internal shift is what has now been put down, and we're all kind of arguing over, and we're all trying to claim that one's better than the other. One is not better than the other. It's exactly the same thing, just a different color, but better still, it's like, in a sense, almost like a different aspect of that same freedom.
Let's shift our conversation a little bit and go into like, what is it that we're trying to internalize? Because we talked a lot about the method of internalizing, and we talked a lot about people that are trying to defend something. Let's talk about where they're, you know, if they stop all that and if they do internalize, where are they going anyhow? And
it's about being real. And I was like, okay, so let's take that further. What is real? And the real is what's sitting where you are right now. And nothing will kind of, in a sense, hold a torch or a candle to where you are right now. And what happens is when where you are is real, then that internalization has happened. Everything is kind of looked at again. Every pointer, every tradition is looked at again, and it's seen for what it truly was. You actually can kind of revisit these pointers and kind of go, wow, that's really cool. I could see where they were talking truth, but I could see where there's a time where I wasn't understanding and where I was now kind of back in there again, and I'm thinking, yeah, that makes perfect sense and stuff. That is kind of like, in a sense, something that, again, is happening internally. But for that, what's happening internally is something that's kind of, in a sense, almost beyond description, beyond words, beyond anything.
We're trying to be real. And then we said, well, trying to be real to where we're at right now. Where we're at, we want to be real with that. And so then, and then we said, okay, like that's a little bit hard to describe. We can point to it, but we don't know exactly how to say it. But I mean, somehow there must be some visible part to it, right? That being real and being where I'm at, and so on and so on. I mean, it must feel different, or what is? I mean, what is the visible part? I mean, my life unfolds in a different way, or
does it look different? Yes, but the thing is this: then when you kind of go into, and I know that's a real kind of carrot on the stick statement, it does feel different, yes. However, then when you kind of put the concept of time into it and look into your whole life story so far, you see that you were always there. It was just what happens is that was, like, in a sense, a different aspect of it that you chose not to recognize, or because of your thinking, or your, again, these basic ideas that you had, these basic methods that you had. Those basic methods didn't let you recognize that, because these basic methods, where they're flawed, is they sell this idea of the destination, the goal, or this freedom being a certain way. And that's why you weren't able to recognize it, because in a sense what happened is like that knowledge, that pointer choked you. It didn't allow you to see your true self because it was one aspect of that reality. And then when you're able to set that aside, you kind of go, hold on, whoa, I actually am that thing. And then you look back and you think, well, I can see why that pointer took me to that point. The pointer was actually right.
So, I mean, we're saying, if I got it right, sometimes these, what we're talking about is mistaken for a goal or a voyage or an attainment. And so somehow, in order to counteract that tendency, well, I think we have to relax, right? And be okay with being here. And so then my notion is that we can coach people about their anxiety level, watching their anxiety level and seeing what's anxious about just being here.
One of the ways to bring this point of relaxation out is that you can use humor. You can come at that person from a different angle, because one of the things you find is people are they've so become enslaved by their pointer or their way, and proven that their way is right and it's better than the other way. That there is that tension there. There is this real tension. I remember meeting this guy once, and he was praying. He was praying, and he was meditating, and it was all to go free. And yet the funny thing is, there was this tension of this, I have got to get to this place, I've got to get to this place because my method tells me, or my pointer tells me that this is what I've got to do, and this can be the only way. And when you kind of show different realities, you say, well, look, this is also saying this as well.
Some people can even be right in the middle of say, looking at themselves or introspection and so on and so on. But there's still an accompanying tension. So then maybe that would be what to look at, is to look at the level of tension and always let it go. Let that tension go more and more. And no matter whether you're doing self-inquiry or any other kind of thing you can describe, let that be in the background. Is this more tension or less? Do I feel anxious, or is this an opening?
It should naturally happen. However, because there's this, like, in a sense, enslavement to the method, or the enslavement to the particular pointer, that is kind of cast aside as, no, it can't be that, because I've got to carry on. I've got to carry on with what I'm doing. Because I've been told that if I pray a certain thing a certain number of times in a day, or if I do this or I do that, then I have to do that. Because then what happens is these moments that you're talking of are missed, because you're so, in a sense, focused. You're not seeing that, it's like there's that expression, you don't see the wood for the trees.
If you think you got to get somewhere and you got to follow a certain thing and you got to achieve something, that is a tension creator for sure. And that is not a prayer. And so then the best thing is to get that out of your prayer.
Is what you've just said is right. It's like, get that tension out of your prayer. At no point, like I've said, I've not said that having a beard or praying 5 times a day is wrong. You're right, it's not wrong. But the thing is take that level of tension out of it. Take that level of the fact that you think you're going to arrive somewhere, or you're going to go somewhere, or that there's certain levels that have to be achieved or attained. In that sense of just dropping into that moment, that prayer becomes prayer. Do you know what I mean? That prayer then, in fact, becomes prayer. And in that sense, it's there. You're completely literally there. And I'm so glad you made that statement now, because it allows it to kind of, in a sense, clarify that whatever your practice, if you take away that tension, and that tension which emanates from I've got to go somewhere, and you fall into whether it's praying 5 times a day, whether it's going to your local, mandir, whether it's chanting, whether it's, Buddhist meditation, when you take away that tension that comes from there's something to go to, and even if there is, that's fine, but to let go of that want and to, in a sense, kind of just drop into that moment, because this is all happening completely in this moment.
Let's just say that if you are successful in taking the tension out, and even taking the tension out of your prayer, you really don't have any beginning to your prayer or any end to it. So then instead of 5 times a day, you're praying only once a day, and it's all day long. It never stops. How about that?
You just said is the whole point is everything becomes this prayer. Everything, this moment is this prayer. And the thing is, there is no letting up in that prayer, and there is no doing that prayer. There is, in a sense, a balance, but there is a balance that's achieved, which is very easy to achieve, and yet what happens is there's a letting go of actually trying to achieve that prayer. I mean, I'm going to jump between different traditions now. It's like in a sense that you're in this prayer, which is really in a sense no prayer, because there's no sense of ownership or claiming that prayer. And in that sense, there's no want or desire.
Okay, so now you're talking about three things, really, because you're talking about an internal kernel, an external kernel, and the integration.
It all becomes one.
Okay, but how do you do any of those? And where's internal and where's external and all that? Why not just say, watch your tension, right? And take the tension out of your prayer. And that might be simple enough to do the whole work.
That will give you part of it. Because the thing is, what I'll say in return to that is, granted the world is illusory, but we still have to live in it. So then what you do is you take it into a practical reality. The whole point of this is that the whole reason for doing any of this, whatever this is it drops into something which is a practical reality, which basically means then that the prayer is going on regardless. Okay, I know we're banding this word prayer around. I don't know why. We just managed to kind of bring this one in. But the prayer is going on regardless, which means in your day-to-day integration, not integration, in your day-to-day activities.
You said that the whole point of this is to drop into the practical, and I totally agree, right?
Exactly.
And then you said something else. You said, even if it's an illusion, we still have to live in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so then, why even say it's an illusion? Just say it's flexible, or it's made out of clay, or the whole fact that it's elusive just means that you can make it up in many different ways and keep looking at it in a different way.
Right.
What's the point of looking at it in a different way? The point is that some ways produce a lot of tension, and some ways produce less tension.
Right.
And if you can always go to less tension with that flexibility, the flexibility is a wonderful tool.
What you then find is that it's regardless if it's at that theoretical stage and all you're trying to do is talk of a theory, it has to become practical and stuff. And what that basically means is your interactions with all those around you, your interactions on a day-to-day basis. Like I work a job. Has this, in a sense, kind of knowing that this actually help with the job? Yes, because there's certain rules and regulations that I kind of live by, that kind of, which I don't actually live by on a way whereby there's that level of tension of I have to do this, because, to rightly point out your point, the tension is gone. But what you find is that it becomes a very dynamic living reality, but not in a theoretical sense, because by even using that term dynamic living reality, I know that people could look at that theoretically as well.
One way is to say responsibility, which sounds like you could get away with anything, right?
Oh, of course you can.
I think it's totally the opposite. That when you give up responsibility, you have no creativity. You're just kind of like a drifter. And you're just like a tadpole or like a frog sitting on a lily pad and watching the world go by. And if somehow there's everything's an illusion and nothing matters, okay, maybe it feels like a relief. But I think you're just giving up your very best human tool. I totally insist, that if it doesn't make practical sense in your day-to-day life, it is a fantasy.
It is really about being real. It is about being able to deal with this in a practical sense. It's literally like you have to face life. Because the thing is, we can sometimes, with our seeking or our approach or our wanting to say that our approach is right, actually turn our back on the very life that's still there, that still needs to be dealt with, that still needs to be, you have to still do certain things in order to get to certain places. And by going down the illusory route, we get rid of that sense of responsibility on ourselves, not because we actually truly believe that, it's because we're actually scared as people to actually face the very life that we've tried to say that we're doing all of this to actually get back into, to live our life truly. So the thing is, yes, live that life truly.
It's so much as in semantics and how you define yourself and your definitions. Okay, so then parts of semantics are kind of just like handy words that don't really exist. Like I could try to save humanity, let's say I'm working to save humanity, but I'm hurting a lot of people, so humans are not important, but humanity is where it's at, It's kind of the same thing with your own life. You could be working for your freedom and stuff like that, but your day-to-day life is, you're slogging through it and it's hell, and you're full of tension and anxiety. And so then it's kind of like to look at your semantics and your words and your definitions and see what's important.
Choose your words, choose your reality and stuff, but actually look to face that reality.
I think that's the greatest. Choose your words and choose your reality. And I think the next time we'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about that it's not hocus pocus, and it's not drawing something with magic, and it's just choose your. We'll really explain what it means. Choose your words and choose your reality.
Release that tension. There's nothing wrong with praying 5 times a day, or growing a beard, or going to the local mandir, or chanting, or doing Buddhist meditation. But take away that tension and allow that prayer to be that prayer. Because as that prayer becomes that prayer, it goes from illusory into reality. And then what happens, it becomes a practical reality. And then you're living life in that complete, total, free, aware, 100% sense of the word. And that's what's beautiful about it. And that's it.
Okay. That's fantastic.